what do you think of the Ford's plans to phase out to only 2 cars and just keep on their trucks?
Well, I mean, that's where the money is right now.
Yep.
But what's also interesting, I mean, they're making money hand over fist on the trucks and the SUVs that they're selling,
Right.
and they're just looking at becoming more of that kind of company, at least for the U.S. market, because that's what the buyers are buying now. People are still buying Toyota and Hyundai sedans and Hondas, and it'll be interesting to see if the other manufacturers follow their lead. I mean, my fear is that while they've improved fuel economy in the larger, heavier vehicles significantly, some gas price increases could hit them fairly hard.
Yeah.
But we're in a fairly dynamic, exciting time of flux from the traditional internal combustion engine to these hybrids and so forth.
Right. Yeah.
So it will be interesting to see how this pans out down the road. I mean, I remember finding an old auto repair manual that my father bought back in the 30s that, looking through the diagrams there, and this is probably back in the 70s and 80s. I used to be an auto mechanic in a Volkswagen shop.
Okay.
And looking at the old, auto repair, engine repair manual from the 1930s, I think it was. I can't remember exactly when, but nothing had really changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
In 40, 50 years.
Right.
And I've got a million auto repair manuals floating around my garage. I sat down and calculated. I probably own 30 cars at least in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I just remember 2 of them that I bought and flipped. Back in the olden times, but the technologies are transforming the production process, the sourcing process, the supply chain networks, and things like that. It's just getting more and more complicated.
Yep.
And more and more sophisticated in terms of, from my perspective.
Yeah.
I've rebuilt engines and carburetors. I haven't gotten too deeply into a transmission ever. Those things scare the hell out of me. But it's getting to the point that the vehicles are just getting really, overly complicated in terms of me, a shade-free mechanic, being able to work on it.
Right, especially when you consider something like a Tesla, where you can. I mean, it's a computer. Have you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Have you been following Tesla lately? There's a lot of Twitter chatter on Tesla about what they're doing. Apparently fudging the numbers to make it look like the production plan is working out.
Interesting.
There are a lot of spies running around Fremont looking at what Tesla's doing there.
Yeah, that's an interesting case study for sure. What Tesla is actually doing versus what they're saying they're doing. And I mean, have you driven one yet? A Tesla?
I've never been in one. No, I haven't.
Yeah,
one of my colleagues has one. She loves it. We've got charging stations here on campus. I've had a few Priuses in the family, but never gotten into. My experience with electric cars was slot car racing back in the 1960s, basically.
That's cool. That's a story in itself, I bet. But no.
And they didn't have that. That was a track with an electric strip on it.
Yeah.
Like the electric trains and stuff that run on the track, like subways, I guess.
Yeah.
Run on an electric track.
Oh, that's cool.
But no, I mean, the other issue is the big name the big name manufacturers are getting into that space now too, and coming up with their own versions of all electric vehicles with 250-mile range, 300-mile range, and so forth. Which is there's going to be, I'm not that optimistic that Tesla's going to be able to pull this off.
No. So then, yeah, because last year when they, with the Gigafactory, there was, lots of articles saying Model 3 is going to be the most American-made car, but you don't think Elon, this whole deck of cards, he's not going to be able to keep it afloat.
Well, he's got a lot of competition moving into that space.
Yeah,
with,
he does.
Jaguar and the Volkswagen Group and people with some pretty deep pockets. I wouldn't be surprised if there was an acquisition of some sort down the road. Even hell, Apple's sitting on a pile of money offshore, probably, buy Tesla to get the proprietary technology there. To the extent that there's significant proprietary technology, it might be with somebody who wants the Gigafactory. That might make sense. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next 5-10 years.
It does. Do you think though that Tesla did at least kind of get the trend moving faster towards electric, or is with the big guys now?
Sure. They're breaking down that resistance to electric vehicles. It's sort of like I don't know, maybe Apple phones when they first came out, or smartphones when they first came out. Suddenly, there were the early adopters, people jumping into that, and then the late adopters come along and they say, I'm starting to see more charging stations around. Personally, I've got range anxiety. I like to be able to pull in a fuel station and fill up. Yeah. I think, if I had to go out and buy a sedan right now, I would look at a Chevy Volt, which I don't have to worry about range anxiety because I can fill the tank up and charge the batteries while I'm driving.
And it's number 2.
Get a good. I think the range. I think they've got something like a 600-mile range.
The Volt
on a tank of fuel.
Wow. Well, and it's number.
The Volt,
And it's number 2 on your rank index. The Volt.
It's up there high, but the numbers they sell are fairly low. In fact, I think I was looking at something recently. They're going to hit the cutoff for the federal tax credit. And I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but the federal tax credit was eligible up to a certain quantity of vehicles produced. And I think they're very close to hitting that threshold. Okay. The $7,500 tax credit.
Yep.
Federal tax credit for electric vehicle, for low emission vehicles.
Okay. So on that, do you think? Have you studied much of what the details in the USMCA are? Have you? I know that doesn't go in place for a while, but do you think that will have a little bit of effect on the automobile industry with the country of origin rules?
Say that again.
The USMCA.
Say that again.
Do you think that the USMCA will have much effect on the auto industry? What the Canada and Mexico? Not the United States Marine Corps, the new silly name that Trump.
Yeah. I know. No, it's a new Village People song. I think that came out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the Village People song.
Any opinion on it?
Well, if it gets ratified,
through Congress,
it's going to have significant effect.
Yeah. Okay.
It's going to have a significant effect on consumer wallet.
Yeah.
It all depends on, automakers. One thing I've learned, automakers are pretty clever at getting numbers to work out the way they want to work out.
Okay.
when I look at the Made in America, you know, my index is based on data that NHTSA collects from the automakers. And, you know, when you look at a car, you've got the American Automotive Labeling Act label there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few issues with that number. This is one of the reasons I did the auto index, is because if you go just by the American Automotive Labeling Act label, things can be quite bizarre. You know, so if you see a car, it's got 60% U.S. Canadian content, but it may have a Mexican engine and an Italian transmission or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, it might be a Fiat 500 or something like that. I can't remember. Don't quote me on a particular car.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the legislation for the American Automotive Labeling Act, and the procedure that they use is different from the procedure that they were using under the original NAFTA rules to figure out rules of origin and local value, labor value content, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the legislation, the number one, the manufacturer's allowed to base that label on the car line. So car line would be a Toyota Corolla. Okay, but then you got, you know, Corollas that are V6 or 4-cylinder or they're hybrid or they're high-end Corollas or they're low-end Corollas. That's the same car line.
Right.
And so I can produce a label that is the standard label. If I look at, you know, most of my vehicles match what this label says, say 60% U.S. Canadian content. Well, first of all, it's U.S. and Canadian content. You know, not that I have anything against Canadians,
right.
But, you know, if you want just U.S. content, just say U.S. content. But when the legislation was written, the automotive industry lobbyists said, you know, hey, we can't break it out. We can't break out Canadian content because we're sitting here in Detroit, right across the river from Ontario. Trucks go back and forth constantly, and you're creating an accounting nightmare. And so Senator Murkowski, I can't remember, senator from Maryland that sponsored this legislation.
Okay.
They said, okay, we'll just, you know, scramble it here and say U.S. Canadian versus everybody else, you know, Mexican and European and whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so there's, you know, number one, it's U.S. Canadian.
Right.
Number two, it's based on car line, so you can, in reality, have a lot of variations in that car line, you know, from what that label says.
Okay.
And number three, you can round up from 70 to 100.
That's what I couldn't believe when I saw that in your index.
Yeah. So when I have a part, you know, it's 70% U.S. Canadian content. It suddenly you round it up to 100% U.S. Canadian content.
Wow.
Now, I'm not sure if. Hold on, let me plug my charger in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if under I call it NAFTA 2, basically.
Yeah.
I'm not sure under the USMCA how much flexibility manufacturers are going to have in terms of getting to the number that they need to get to zero tariffs. And it may well be some of them just say, we can't do this, we're going to pay the alternative tariff. Or we're going to pay whatever the tariff is.
Right.
And I still haven't gotten a good idea of what the other tariff is. Is it going to be 25%? Is it going to be 10%? Is it going to be 2.5%?
Yeah.
That's still
in the air.
as far as I know, that's still up in the air.
Yeah, me too.
Unless you.
No, same.
It's still going to be the standard. You know, if a Mexican car, if a Volkswagen can't make that 70% threshold or
75%.
Yeah,
75.
70% threshold by 2020.
Yep.
If they can't, they'll just pay the 2.5% tariff. It would be too expensive for them to get there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's
Interesting.
let's see. Yeah, I'm looking at the Congressional Research Service statement there.
Okay.
Yeah, 75% rules of origin.
Right.
The $16 an hour labor requirement is going to be problematic.
Yeah, and the unions
how
in
you
Mexico.
get to that?
Yep. Go ahead.
Well, if I was going to play with the numbers, I don't like to use that term, but manipulate the numbers, or if I was gonna figure out a way to meet this threshold, to meet the legal requirements, got to look very, very closely at the agreement. If you look at the have you looked at the actual article, the new agreement, the provisions? If you look at Appendix to Annex 4B, okay. Let me find out what page that's on. I'm not sure. I printed it out, and the damn thing came out landscape instead of portrait. And I think the footnotes got cut off because that's the tricky part is the footnotes. Yep. But there was let me find it. It's quite okay. Regional value content. It's the labor value content that's tricky. Labor value content. Okay. So, production meets the labor value content of 30%. So by January 2020, you got 30% labor, high value labor, $16 an hour labor, and so that you can have 15 percentage points of high wage material and manufacturing expenditures, no more than 10 percentage points of high wage technology expenditures, and no more than 5 percentage points of high wage assembly expenditures. Okay. Yep. So that's by 2020, and then by 2023, January 2023, it goes up to 40%. Right. Yeah. All right. So you got high wage material and manufacturing expenditures, at least 15%. High wage technology expenditures, so that would be research development, salaries, wages, things like that. 5% points of high wage assembly expenditures, and I'm not sure the footnote got cut off. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe this works. Maybe this explains it. All right, so IT expenditures. All right, for high wage, if you look at paragraph 3 of 4B-1-17, high wage material manufacturing expenditures and purchase value, wage rate is at least $16 an hour as a percentage of net cost of the vehicle. High wage tech expenditures, that's wages on R&D or IT. High wage assembly expenditures of no more than 5% points of view demonstrates it has an engine, assembly, transmission, assembly, or has long range contracts with an average production wage of $16 an hour. So getting to that number, starting with 30% in 2020, going up to 40% in 2023, they're gonna have all sorts of fun. That number is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Okay. Right. So I deliver the number to the government, the federal government, and so the U.S. Customs or Homeland Security, Bureau of Customs Enforcement. I deliver that number, and then someone's got to audit it. Okay?
Right.
Is it going to be audited? Nobody audits the numbers that are in the American Automotive Labeling Act that I am aware of. So this is going to be a compliance issue, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the automakers are sitting there sweating the details. They've got their lawyers picking over this with a fine-tooth comb and then trying to figure out, how do we finesse this? How do we get to 30% and then gradually up to 40%? It remains to be seen how this is going to fall out. And top of all is still got to be ratified by Congress.
Right. This is all considering that happens, which seems likely, possible, I guess. But all right. So, that gives me.
Well, I mean, part of it is pressing. Say, look, I did what I promised. I got rid of NAFTA.
Right.
Well, okay, but maybe you created something worse in the process. And I want to make it clear, I'm pretty much made in America agnostic. I've owned cars from every corner of the earth, basically. I'll probably never own another French car, but I've owned 2 French cars. I can't recall an Italian car in there. I don't think I've owned a Korean car yet. I've never owned a Chinese car. Or an Indian car, although I made a bunch of money on Tata Motors stock. But unfortunately I didn't get out when I should have. But this is adding, especially with the steel and aluminum tariffs on top of this, adding a lot more expenditures to the cost of the vehicle. Notwithstanding that, all right, we want to create more jobs in the U.S. We want to create more employment opportunities in the U.S. I toured. Have you been in a car factory recently?
Not recently, no. I haven't.
Yeah.
What'd you tour?
I was in the Ford Explorer factory in Chicago a couple months ago, up there visiting my son, and I watched 18 Japanese robots make Ford Explorer doors. So, there's the 10% IT expenditure right there.
Yeah.
Or 10% high cost labor expenditure right there.
Yeah.
Now, somebody's got to make the robots. Somebody's got to fix them. These were Japanese robots. I believe they were Kawasaki. So it will be interesting to see if this really does have a demonstrable effect on employment.
Yeah, that was my next question. Will this create more automation with the or will it create more jobs, or could it be a little bit of both? It's tough.
Well, the trend is it takes fewer and fewer people to make a car today.
Right.
So you've got fewer and fewer people on the line. So your labor the number of people on the line go down, and you can increase their salaries, of course.
Yeah.
In the U.S. and Canada, it's not a problem getting to the $16 an hour. It's Mexico where it's going to be a problem to get to $16 an hour.
Right.
And so the net effect is then it comes down and it depends. Well, if we only have to pay a 2.5% penalty to export the vehicle to the U.S., then who cares? Why worry about it?
Yeah, why try to hit that 75%? Yeah.
Yeah, because if it's going to cost me 10% of the value of the car, to get to that 75%, I'll just pay the tariff. I'll just do what the Europeans do and not worry about it. And it's also going to complicate, in the case of Mexico, it's going to create a problem for them in terms of kind of having two different vehicles. If they try to meet that threshold, there'll be a vehicle that they export a little bit over like 2.3 million vehicles to the U.S. every year. Mm-hmm. But then they export about 1.5 million vehicles to the rest of the world that don't have these restrictions. And so I could see a situation where, okay, well, I'll just limit the amount of production that I build for export to the U.S. and just focus on the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So exporting Volkswagens to South America, Central America, Europe, Asia, wherever.
Yeah, that makes
and run my line that way. Again, it's the compliance costs that are going to be problematic. And I'm sure you've seen the Center for Automotive Research study, the Peterson Institute study, mm-hmm. where they look at the net cost in terms of cost to the consumer, higher prices for cars, right. Reduction in car sales, reduction in fewer people driving, or fewer people replacing older cars. Maybe it's good for the car mechanics out there keeping cars on the road.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah, very dynamic. And
that was, you remember the Cash for Clunkers program.
Very well.
After 07, 08, 09, I can't remember exactly the years, but that took a lot of used cars off the road. Mm-hmm. And that took perfectly viable vehicles off the road.
They got you A to B.
People went in and, if you call a $1,000 car a viable vehicle, and that I do call a $1,000 car a viable vehicle.
For sure, yeah.
For me, because I fix my own cars, but it's like
so
it's like I asked a friend of mine, what sort of characteristic do you look for in a car? Do you care if it's made in America or made in Japan or whatever? Mm-hmm. And my friend said, I just care if it starts.
And that's a common sentiment for most people. Get me to A to B.
Yeah. I just care if it gets me from point A to point B. Right. I care less about any of this other stuff.
Right, the average American. But if we keep, the assumption is if we keep that, giving it to a U.S. manufacturer, it keeps that money in the economy rather than going offshore.
Yeah.
So let me ask you. Go ahead.
International trade theory has shown over and over and over again that tariffs don't work. They're a tax on consumer. They inflate the cost of goods sold. Yep. That tariff, that tax comes out of my wallet, your wallet, exactly. Everybody else's wallet.
Exactly. It's not.
And it impedes innovation. I mean, I go back to my first car was a 1963 Oldsmobile, and I've had a whole bunch of different cars in between. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, look, if it wasn't for the Japanese and Japanese innovations in automotive manufacturing, we'd still be driving old American clunkers around here.
True.
Foreign competition pushes innovation. Now, you can get in a big debate about fair competition. You can get into a debate about currency manipulation. You can get into, talk about industrial espionage, theft of trade secrets, and intellectual property and all that. Right. And that's another issue.
Right. But no, it makes sense. Just like free trade.
But
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that, nationally, if we look at, an open market is a good thing, so why not worldwide? It should similar premise, open market. So it creates innovation and
that's where the good coming out of this is pushing the Chinese to open their markets to more foreign competition and to reduce their tariff rates and so forth. But yeah, the Chinese, they've got an unemployment problem they've got to deal with. They've got a population rate problem they've got to deal with, and they're looking out for themselves. My fear with the negative publicity about the tariffs is going to affect other exporters, other companies doing business in China. Chinese consumers going to vote with their wallet.
Right.
They're going to go, oh, I might have bought that Ford or the Chevrolet. I might have bought a Buick, right? But I'm going to go with the German car now. I'm going to go with something else.
Yeah.
And then even that, the BMW exported from the factory in Spartanburg to China is going to get dinged with the retaliatory tariffs against U.S.-made vehicles.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
There's another moving part there.
So yeah, I hope that we can get past the tariff rhetoric and come up with some type of good negotiation with China. But I've followed that, but not as extensively as I should. Let me ask you this: so, of the last 5 or 6 years doing this, when you started, was there anything that really surprised you, that jumped out to you when doing this research, that you didn't expect to see or that you didn't know?
I've been playing around with cars for most of my life, since I was probably 14, and looking over my father's shoulder while he worked on cars, and I know, one of the I tell people how did you get interested in international business, and I say, well, I was a car mechanic, and I worked at a Volkswagen shop fixing the old air-cooled Volkswagens, and we used to get a lot of parts from West Germany at the time. Mm-hmm. That were labeled made in West Germany. Mm-hmm. And then we started getting a lot of parts from Brazil and other parts of the world, because the buyer, the boss, liked a good deal when he saw one, and mm-hmm. Our supplier would start getting stuff from Brazil and Mexico and other parts of the world, which had moved into producing parts for Volkswagens. The old, like the last Volkswagen Beetle assembly line was shut down in Mexico, I think in 1997, something like that. So that became a big source of points. But you also saw the quality level of those parts was nowhere near the quality level of the German parts. And so in terms of looking at the made in America index, and looking at, I think that the fun thing to look at is, where did the engine come from? Where did the transmission come from? Where was the car assembled? And to kind of look at wow, what a crazy supply chain for something like the Ford Transit Connect, yeah. Which is I'm trying to let me look up the Transit Connect mm-hmm. right away, because that's got a really weird pedigree. I think it's assembled in. Let me see, Ford. Here we go. Transit Connect. So 7 is Spain. I got it coded here. Okay. 7, 3, and 8. So 3. All right. So I remember what it is. So the Transit Connect is a really interesting one. So assembled in Spain, Mexican engine, and 8 was a Turkish transmission. What the 8 was. Might have been a French transmission. Hold on a second, I gotta put the phone down, put in my password.
No worries.
Okay, you're on speaker now.
Okay. All right. The Transit Connect, 10% U.S. Canadian made. And the rest, it's a melting pot.
Yeah, okay. Here's the code. France, 7 is Spain, 3 is Mexico. Yeah. So the cool thing there, I mean, the Transit Connect is you've got parts and components flying all over the world to get into that vehicle. It wasn't this year, I believe it was last year. The Chevrolet Impala, or the Chevy SS, assembled in Canada with a U.S. engine and U.S. transmission. All right. So, what are we doing there?
Yeah.
Shipping a U.S. engine transmission to wait, what did I say? Canada?
To Canada.
And Australia.
What?
Okay. Yeah, the Chevy SS. This is a muscle car.
Yep.
Competes with the Ford Mustang, Camaro, whatever. And I believe that was a 2016 model, but assembled in Australia with a U.S. engine and U.S. transmission. That's weird.
That is weird. Now, can you tell me what was...
Because
go ahead.
That engine transmission got to get to Australia, to a factory down there, and then turns around and comes back.
Yeah, and that's not a short trip. It just doesn't... How is that costly? I mean, how does that even make sense? I don't know. So let me ask you, from 2017 to 2018, the Traverse, the Enclave, and the Acadia fell off. Do you know what GM did? What they do between those 2 years with those vehicles?
They cut down I believe they started sourcing more parts and components from Mexico.
Okay.
I mean, I can actually tell you if I can find the. I got to get better organized here.
No, and the TDC, that's the rating that you use, right? That's what TDC is, or top.
Yeah, I call that. I basically call that total domestic content.
Total domestic content.
So, all right. So, 2017, Traverse Acadia, they had 71% U.S. Canadian content.
Right.
U.S. 71% U.S. Canadian parts and components. Now that doesn't count the engine and transmission. Okay. So then, see if I can pick them up. I think they dropped down into the 50s.
Yeah, they tanked.
General Motors, Lacrosse, Malibu.
The front wheel drive Traverse is 17 rank, and the all wheel drive is 38.
Okay.
Yeah, I like your search.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the original number here.
Gotcha. 21%.
I missed it somewhere. Hold. Escalade, Sonata, Terrain. Yeah, Terrain Equinox dropped down to 45% U.S., 40% Mexican.
Oh, so that was.
So the Acadia dropped down to the Traverse dropped down to 57% and 21% Mexican.
Okay.
And in 2017, that was it was 71%. So it dropped from 71% down to 57%.
Okay.
So that accounts for the big drop there.
Okay, cool. And then let me see. So do you see a trend? Are we becoming more, or are we becoming less American made in America as far as cars? Or could this USMCA?
Oh yeah. Less, but at a very gradual rate. Okay. I've been working on another little paper looking at the trends over 6 years, and what it looks like initially is the U.S. automotive automakers are looking at Mexico more rapidly than the foreign automakers are.
Okay.
In other words, Mexico is becoming a supply source for Ford, GM, Fiat Chrysler at a slightly more rapid rate than Toyota, Honda, Nissan,
Got it.
missing one, Koreans, etc., than the other automakers.
Okay.
But when you look at, you also got to look at Toyota's product line and Honda's product line and Nissan's product line. And so within that product line, they've got a lot of models made in the U.S., but they also have a lot of models that are imported from Japan, or imported from other parts of the world. And you don't see that as much with the U.S. automakers. You also see with the U.S. automakers that there's this codependency with Mexico. In other words, the more U.S. manufacturing you have, the more Mexican manufacturing you have. So the production planners, the supply chain managers, as a result of NAFTA, the original NAFTA, they're saying, hey, we can get parts and components from Mexico, and we can build them down there. And that becomes part of the supply chain network that gets built into the production planning process. Now, under the new NAFTA, USMCA, that's going to be more of an issue in terms of my decision process, in terms of where do I go for a supplier. And it may well be, I still get stuff supplied from Mexico, but then I ship it across the border and I add just enough value added in the U.S. to get it to meet the threshold to become a U.S. part component.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what some will do.
So, yeah. I mean, I'll have two plants. I'll have a plant in El Paso, and I have a plant in Ciudad Juarez across the border, or Nuevo Laredo, or Tijuana and San Diego. And I'll do as much of it as I can get away with at the cheaper labor cost. Ship it across the border and add some $16 or $25 an hour value to it, and then I get up to whatever the threshold is that I need.
Get your average.
Never underestimate how clever people are out there. It will be interesting to see how this plays out over the next few years. But first, it's got to get through Congress.
Right. So what do you think because we're obviously manufacturing becoming more and more advanced, as you saw when you went to the Ford Explorer plant, do you think that's the future of American manufacturing? It's allowing us to compete more now that more automation is being integrated in?
Yeah. I mean, we're getting to the point of autonomous vehicles, autonomous taxis. I saw something yesterday. They're looking at autonomous cargo ships. Okay, so you don't really need. Do you really need a big crew for a cargo ship? You load it up and send it across the ocean, and it tracks itself, and then you meet it on the other side, dock it, and unload it.
Yeah, and there's no telling in 10 years what this will look like with Moore's Law and.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a new wave of automation and productivity and intellectual property and content. Now, does this bode well for a coal miner in West Virginia that dropped out of high school? No, it doesn't.
Not at all, unless he realizes he needs to switch over to solar and get into that industry. So,
Well, and that, circling back to Tesla, Tesla's got all this intellectual property
right.
floating around in there.
Yeah, when I drove, I rented a 2014 Model S a few weeks ago to test drive for 24 hours, and I drove in the autopilot, and it was surreal. It was really neat. I mean, I'm a tech nerd, so I'm into this stuff, and you just switch over, and I mean, it switches lanes for you. It was to see full automation, or at least this much automation. I drove from St. Petersburg, Florida, to Tampa, full automation. It was a cool experience. But that's the future.
Yeah, and that I was on an airplane with a guy sitting next to me, and he designs automotive interiors. Cool. And he was going to some automotive interior conference somewhere. I think I was flying to San Francisco, and he said it like they're totally having to rethink automotive interiors because of the autonomous vehicles. Because people are going to be pivoting their seats back to talk to the passenger. People are going to be playing cards. There's going to be no steering wheel. It's pretty bizarre stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. GM I think they released a prototype showing their no steering wheel vehicle that could be as soon as 2020 for certain areas. But Frank, I really appreciate. Go ahead.
In terms of technological innovation, another anecdote, I have a 2010 Ford Explorer I drive. Mm-hmm. I also owned a 1988 Nissan Pathfinder that I bought brand new when I first got my first job here at AU. Uh-huh. And my 2010 Ford Explorer really is not that much more advanced than my 88 Pathfinder is, or was.
Right.
Got a backup warning beeper if you're going to back into something, and it's got satellite radio, and that's about it. and I've driven a Nissan Armada that you needed to have a computer science degree to figure the thing out.
I'm sure all of the gadgets, all of the gadgets and everything it can do.
Yeah, and of course that was a 2018 Armada, and 2018 Explorers I'm sure caught up, but it's this innovation that's very critical. I worry that we are shooting ourselves in the foot by walling off some of this innovative technology that might be coming in from overseas. So the solar technology, the battery technologies and things like this.
Great point. Yeah.
We're gonna be ceding this to China, India, Germany, France, the Europeans in terms of technological innovation there, and that worries because we've always been
that leader.
Typically at the forefront of technological innovation, and we need to be there.
We absolutely do. We need to stay that innovative leader.